What's up, gangsters? It's time to take a look at some more controversial movies. We've covered religion, we've covered homosexuality, so now it's time to cover some movies that included characters that were perhaps a little young and that were put in situations that were perhaps a little controversial. And it's funny how in the previous two videos, you take a look at some of the movies and you're like, how were these controversial? That wouldn't really be the case nowadays anymore. Because in this video, the movies we're gonna talk about today, it's kind of the opposite. As in, some of the stuff we're gonna see in these movies, it's, can't really do that shit anymore nowadays. Although, not so much with the first movie, and perhaps it doesn't fit the theme all that well, but it might be my favorite movie on today's list, so let's just talk about it either way. From 1956, it's Baby Doll. Directed by highly acclaimed filmmaker Elia Kazan. Is that how you pronounce it? Whose other work includes A Streetcar Named Desire, which introduced the world to Marlon Brando, and East of Eden, which introduced the world to James Dean. Nice, and well, he kind of did it again with Baby Doll, like introducing a future star, this time Carol Baker, who in the movie plays the role of, well, Baby Doll. Sorry for the noise if you can hear this. Anyway, let's just take a look at this movie. So, we're in the southern US, it's the 1950s, and we follow Archie here, an alcoholic, bad-tempered cotton gin owner with a failing business. But he does have a cute young wifey, the 19-year-old, somewhat childish Baby Doll. But their marriage kinda sucks.
Now look here, Big Shot. The day that Aunt Rose Comfort is unwelcome under your roof, then her and me both is moving out.
Well, now she can't cook.
Marriage, am I right? She's unhappy and he just wants to bang her, but he has to wait until she turns 20, according to an earlier made agreement. And Baby Doll, she's pretty sexy. Until she opens her mouth, that is.
Now I'm gonna plug up the hole in that wall with chewing gum. And if I ever catch you poking a knife through it again to pick at me in my sleep.
What accent is that? Early on in the movie, we see her laying in a crib, sucking her thumb. This became the main promotional image for the movie, which probably caused most of the controversy. Since, the Catholic Legion of Decency didn't think that this was very decent. Probably also didn't help that in the movie, while she is laying there, her husband is spying on her like an old pervert. Anywho's, Archie is running out of money because of this guy, Silva Vaquero, who recently came to town with a more fancy cotton gin operation, stealing everybody's business. So, in a rage of jealousy and anger, Archie decides to burn down this new fancy gin, and well, this gets Silva involved with Archie and Baby Doll. May sound a little dull, and yeah, it's old and black and white and but it's surprisingly effective. It's a drama/comedy, and it's actually quite funny at times.
My daddy would turn over in his grave. He knew he would just turn over in his
Baby
grave.
Doll, your daddy turned in his grave as often as you say he turned in his grave. That old man would plow up the graveyard.
Yeah, it made me laugh quite a bit. This guy here might not agree, but hey. Besides that, I just love the performances and the interaction and chemistry between the three main characters. Silva, played by, at the time, newcomer Eli Wallach, probably best known as the Ugly from The Good, the Bad and the Ugly. He's fantastic. He's so charismatic, so not ugly. But besides that, Archie is, he's quite entertaining as well, as is Baby Doll. So, what's so wrong about this movie? The girl, Baby Doll, she's 19. That's always been above the age of consent in Mississippi from what I understand. Besides, she's a virgin throughout the whole movie. Hashtag no spoilers. Well, I guess it was mostly just because, it's the 1950s and there is actually quite some suggestive sexuality going on. Especially when Silva decides to try and seduce Baby Doll. And this wasn't just offensive to the Christians. Even Time magazine described this movie as possibly the dirtiest American-made motion picture that has ever been legally exhibited. What are you talking about? Sure, I mean, 60 years ago it's a different time, but that's kind of also what I like about these videos, about the controversial movies. You really get to see how times have changed. I mean, obviously they have, but hey. The holds up surprisingly well. Perhaps it was also just, you know, a little ahead of its time, also with pushing the boundaries of sexuality in film. I mean, it's not gonna make people jerk up in theaters nowadays anymore, but you know, it's a pretty good movie. Check it out. So next up, and you know, if we're gonna talk about movies with underage characters that are put in a somewhat sexualized setting, we obviously can't ignore the next one since its title basically became synonymous with just that. Of course, I'm talking about Lolita. Originally a modern classic of a novel by Vladimir Nabokov. Nabokov? Sorry? It's been adapted for the screen twice, and we're gonna take a look at the original one, directed by none other than Stanley Kubrick in 1962. Well, woo! Let's see. Lolita, a sexually precocious young girl. That's interesting. And I bet that's exactly what Humbert here thought when he moved to the US to prepare for his new job as a professor and was looking for a room to rent from this somewhat annoying lady and wasn't convinced until he saw her daughter, Lolita. That's kind of what this movie is about. Middle-aged man becomes obsessed with little girl. In the novel, she's 12 when he meets her. In the movie, it's deliberately left unmentioned in order to avoid too much controversy. The actress, Sue Lyon, she was 14, I believe, when the movie was shot, so let's say 14. She's cute though, can you say that? Still, a little young, Humbert. Doesn't stop him though from trying to spend time with her. He even goes as far as marrying the mother just to be with Lolita, and eventually even considers killing the mother just to have Lolita to himself. Great guy, right? Well, he somewhat is, actually, compared to his novel counterpart, that is. The movie was toned down quite a bit, as in the novel, for example, he at one point tries to drug and rape Lolita. And, well, that's just not cool. This sexual obsession from the novel comes across more as just a crush in the movie, since, you know, a lot of the eroticism, if you will, was heavily toned down in order to avoid problems with the censors. Which I think does somewhat negatively affect the impact of the story, you know, like how wrong it all actually is. Especially with James Mason's overly decent accent.
I absolutely refuse to have a quartet of strange psychologists nosing around my house.
Damn it, I mean, can't really get mad at that now, can you? Nevertheless, the movie was still pretty controversial. Mostly just because, well, it was a movie about a middle-aged man getting involved with a girl in her early teens. I wonder how a movie like that would have been received nowadays. Adrian Lyne, director of, among others, Jacob's Ladder, well, he tried this some 20 years ago, and even though his version is more faithful to the original novel, it bombed pretty bad at the box office. Kubrick's version, it's pretty good. It could have been a lot more effective though. You kinda miss Humbert's backstory as to why he's obsessed with younger girls. So this Lolita obsession seemingly comes out of nowhere. Plus, the balance of drama and comedy it's pretty weird. Sometimes it's borderline slapstick, and well, every time Peter Sellers enters the screen, he's great, obviously. It's mostly just a lot of fun, but I feel like that's what this movie, or you know, this story actually shouldn't be. Although, from what I understand, there might actually be quite some very, very dark humor in the original novel. But as you've probably come to expect from me by now, I haven't read the novel, so I wouldn't know. The movie, I liked it. It runs for some 2.5 hours, which seems long, but it doesn't really feel overly long. Like I said, it could have been a little more effective perhaps, but hey, it is what it is. So, you know what? Let's just jump ahead to the 70s, because you know, as we all know, everything went in the 70s. So let's start in France to take a look at A Real Young Girl. Nice. It's the first movie by controversial filmmaker Catherine Breillat. Is that how you pronounce it? A filmmaker that often focuses on female sexuality, like she also did in the movie Fat Girl. So yeah, what do you prefer, a real young girl or a fat girl? No, those are the type of questions I don't want to answer. So let's just take a look at the first one, a real young girl. So, meet the real young girl, Alice. IMDb and Wikipedia both say she's 14, but I don't remember this being mentioned in the movie. She looks much older. I mean, the actress, she was 20 when the movie was being made. But hey, it's a real young girl, so let's just say 14. She is on a summer break from boarding school, which she's spending at home with her parents, and well, basically, she's just going through her sexual awakening phase. In other words, she's just a horny teenager. And a dirty one while we're at it. And a dirty, horny teenager might sound like a lot of fun, but Alice, I don't know. She's puking all over herself, she enjoys a visit to some nasty toilets, she's fascinated by anything slimy and sticky, and when her panties aren't down her ankles, she's covering dog carcasses with them. And don't get me wrong, I'm all for free and open sexuality and the exploration of all of that, but, you know, imagining your dad's penis is, you know, maybe a little weird. At some attempt of a plot element, there's this guy, Jim, who is hired by Alice's father at the local sawmill, and with whom Alice becomes somewhat sexually infatuated. But besides that, she's mostly just, you know, sitting bare-bottomed on the beach, sitting bare-bottomed on her bike, or sitting bare-bottomed on the train tracks. And all of this might sound pretty interesting and fun to watch, and I haven't even mentioned one of her quite graphic fantasies, which includes her vagina and a worm. But I mostly experienced this movie as quite boring. Also, definitely didn't help that, and I don't know if it's just the bad lighting, but the movie kinda looks a little ugly. Which is a shame, because as some of you might know, I do enjoy a good, edgy, coming-of-age sexual awakening story. And I've never been a teenage girl myself, so I can't tell if this movie is somewhat relatable, or if it really just went for shock value. But regardless, I didn't think it was very interesting. I do get the controversy, it's obviously pretty out there, which actually caused this movie to only being officially released some 25 years after production was done, although this also partly had to do with the fact that the production company that financed the movie went bankrupt. Okay, you know, I don't really know what else to say about this one. I mean, it's definitely not for everybody. I mean, if you're open for a bold sexual awakening story, maybe give it a chance. Otherwise, I honestly don't think it's all that interesting. So, for a video about controversial movies that deals with underage characters, the movie so far mostly just showed older actresses playing younger girls. So, how about a movie that just fully went there? Let's take a look at the Italian-German co-production of Maladolescenza. Is that how you pronounce it? According to a Vice article, it's the only movie to have ever been deemed illegal here in the Netherlands. As in, owning it on a physical disc is illegal, I guess. I tried to read the judicial verdict, but Jesus, just write like normal people, man. Anyway, yeah, let's take a look. The movie opens with a shot of a fully naked boy. Oh no. But, from what I understand, this actor was 18 at the time of production, so nothing wrong here. He is Fabrizio, and he's always just hanging out in the forest. Then enters Laura, a girl that is seemingly in love with Fabrizio and just wants to be around him all the time. But Fabrizio, he's a bit of a dickhead, always teasing and manipulating her, and eventually basically just abusing her, both mentally and physically. Then this other girl, Sylvia, gets involved, and well, her and Fabrizio then basically just continue bullying Laura. Not a bad story per se, you know, when it comes to teenage behavior and themes like bullying, it could potentially be pretty interesting. It's just not really. The movie, it's incredibly cheaply made. You only have 3 characters. They even credited the dog to expand the list of characters. It's completely shot on location, which I do have to admit, it's a very nice location, but also kinda cheap. Plus, the dubbing is horrible.
Siehst du, ich bin auch dieses Jahr wieder pünktlich. Ich weiß nicht warum, aber es ist so.
But you are all probably like Sure, it's a shitty movie, but what about the controversy? Well, the two girls, they were both around the age of 11 or 12 when this movie was shot, and there's a lot of nudity in here. And not just one or two innocent topless shots, it gets pretty graphic at times. Definitely graphic enough for people to label this as child pornography. And, well, that's like, oh shit, you know? And if you look at the definition of child pornography, at least according to the US federal law, it's any visual depiction of sexually explicit conduct involving a minor. These girls they're definitely minor, and some of their behavior seems rather sexually explicit, so I don't know. It's probably one of those I know it when I see it cases. I mean, there is, of course, always the discussion of art versus pornography, so, you know, maybe this movie is just art? Maybe not very well made art. I mean, I do like the soundtrack, it's kind of cheesy, but I actually listen to it every now and then. But the overall movie, in my opinion, isn't that great. It has some interesting themes going on, I guess, about teenage human nature, perhaps. But the end result is just a little weak. So yeah, it's a tricky one, this one. When people talk about this movie, it's almost always about the controversy and the legality of this movie, more so than the actual movie itself. And, well, in all honesty, that is probably more interesting than the movie itself. Eva Ionesco, I don't know, the actress who plays the blonde girl in the movie, she's the daughter of controversial photographer Irina Ionesco, who used her daughter Eva as a model for erotic photos since she was as young as, I believe, 5 years old. You know, to perhaps give a little bit of context. Then in 2011, Eva directed her first movie, the semi-autobiographical My Little Princess, which basically tells that story, you know, of the mom and the photography and all. So, worth checking out. Maladolescenza, perhaps not so much. Woo! So, well, that brings us to the last movie on today's list, which, like the previous movie, became kind of controversial for showing a naked, underage girl. But unlike the previous movie, this one is much less obscure and overall just a much better made movie. It's Pretty Baby. The young girl in question is now an older woman. It's Brooke Shields. So let's just take a look. Set in New Orleans during the late 1910s, an era when prostitution was still, well, at the end of being legal, we follow the people in this whorehouse, or should I say brothel. One of the whores, or should I say prostitutes, is this lady, Hattie, who has a 12-year-old daughter, Brooke Shields, or should I say Violet. Well, she's just hanging around the house, and then one day this guy arrives, Mr. Belloc, a photographer who basically becomes part of the brothel, photographing different prostitutes, mostly Violet's mom, which in return makes Violet a little jealous since she seems to like Mr. Belloc a bit. But first, it's time to auction off little Violet because, you know, little 12-year-old virgins, they go for some good guap. And I know I already mentioned the nudity in this movie, but this whole setting and themes of child prostitution, of course, also contributed a big part to the controversial status of this movie. I guess people just aren't that comfortable with the idea of selling a 12-year-old girl as a virgin over and over and over again. Understandably so. Plus, well, like I said, then there's also the nudity. Well, definitely not as graphic as in Maladolescenza. There's still a few scenes in which Brooke Shields appears pretty naked. It didn't really bother me though. I mean, it just is what it is. And well, like I said, it isn't graphic. I mean, if anything, I was more disturbed by the scenes of the older men groping and fondling her. I mean, that's just kind of creepy. But the overall movie, I like it. I like how there is such a consistent color scheme. You know, the whole movie is so yellowish. The performances are pretty good and the story, albeit pretty controversial, it's also quite interesting at the same time. It's loosely based on the actual photographer E.J. Belloc, who actually photographed a lot of prostitutes in New Orleans in the early 20th century. The young girl, you know, the violet part, that's fictional. But I did read that it's been inspired by Eva Ionesco's story, you know, the blonde girl from the previous movie. Although I can't really seem to find any legit sources for that claim. So yeah, Pretty Baby. It's about child prostitution and there's some child nudity. If that's too edgy for you, I suggest you stay away. But if you're not that easily offended, check it out. It's actually a pretty good watch. Yeah, that sums it up pretty well, I think. Also, as you might have seen, I mean, you probably have, I censored the nudity in this video, which kind of goes against my principles. I don't like to do that. I don't like to be forced to do that. But you know, in this case, it's probably for the best. Just wanted to, I don't know. So that was a good one. That brings us to the end of this video, and wow, that was quite another controversial ride, wasn't it? I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. I guess there's, you know, like there's quite some themes and stuff, you know, like morals when it comes to these movies to discuss, to talk about. So maybe we can continue the conversation down below in the comments. You know, let me know what you thought about the movies, about the themes, about the, you know, about this stuff. And then I'll see you guys next time. Cheers.